Hello, everyone. We are live. It's the beginning of the study group. Well, in 10 minutes, it's the beginning of the study group. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward through time, or you can sit here and listen to me in the pre-show as I invite people into the chat room. We kind of get things ready. Let's do a /live for the study group. Study group. How's everything going, everybody? Let's do a quick check of the cameras. I like that one there. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. Do I have something on my screen I can show you? Yes. How about me on the screen? Hey, there we go. Hi. How you doing? Good to see you. How about something? Oh, I need to get rid of that. We don't need to see that. We need to show this. Let's do this. Maybe we'll do another one here. Good. See, it all works. It's alive. Oh, good. Okay. It's alive. Okay. There's, what else? What else? Let's see. It's 9 minutes so we get started. In about 4 minutes, the invite goes out to the Facebook, Google+, email, Twitter folks. So they'll get that. I see folks already answering questions on Socrative. Welcome. Wow, you are quick on Socrative. If you're answering on Socrative that you have been studying less than 3 months and yet you know Socrative is already there, then you've been watching these before. Coffee's on board. That was questionable because it's a little rainy out. Let's go to birdfeeder.live to the live stream in the back of the yard. Oh, and there's actually a bird there. Look, there's Cardinal there in the rain. Not much there. Let's turn down the audio there. There's not much for him to eat, him to eat. No, it's a her because it's the red. Isn't that the way it works, or is the female the brown? I don't know. That needs to get filled up, doesn't it? 68 degrees, though. Not raining at the moment. That's kind of nice. Let's see a little better shot of the Cardinal. There you go. Very nice. So today I've got Network Plus. Oh, look, getting a good shot. Hi, how you doing? Telling me that I need to put some more food in the feeder, apparently. That would be nice. Sorry, Cardinal. So red with that. The males are the red, the females are the brown. So I think I got that right at the beginning, that he was the male. You have tuned into the study group. This is not a bird feeder, bird watching group, although it is sometimes at the beginning because we have time. I seem to have everything in where it should be. All my ducks are in the proverbial rows. And after the study group, it looks like I need to go out and put some more food in the feeder because my man there's not getting any food. Hello, chat room. Welcome. I got the vocal zone is already on board, so we've got that going on. I've got what else? Should probably get the spray here going. Boy, now they're asking questions about, oh, look at that. A bluebird. Blue and red today. Oh, he's not happy. Brother, it's my food. Well, they're managing to make the best of it there, aren't they? What kind of stone is around my fireplace? Now we're getting questions that I'm not accustomed to hearing. This stone right here. I don't know for sure, but I know someone who does. I can find out. But it is stone. So I do know that. How are we on time? We got 5 minutes. I guess it's good that everything is all ready to go. So right now we should see tweets. Let's confirm that. I don't play music on the stream because they will take the stream down. It is copyright violation. And they don't like it. So I don't do it. Let's see, Twitter people. Yes, got my tweet. Let's see if people are showing up in the YouTube side. I can see people arriving. Yes, people are arriving. Welcome. Excellent. Come in. Come in. Socrative.com. Socrative.com. Room name. Professor Messer. What the heck is that in the bird feeder? Is that a robin? Don't know that I've seen one before. Looks young. Boy, they're hungry. Oh! Mom and Dad are showing up. We got drama going on the bird feeder right now. I did not have copyright issues with the stock music that I used. There were no copyright issues at all because I owned the copyright. The issues were that certain countries blocked all music from playing because of licensing issues, not copyright issues. That's okay. You can't give me music that I can use. I had complete copyright and license for the music that I was using. And it's too bad. There's just Germany blocks all videos that have music on YouTube unless they have gone through the licensing system that Germany has, which stock music that you buy off the internet doesn't have. You know, you'd have to be Beyonce, and yes, okay, you can play Beyonce because there's an agreement, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just how it works. So I can't even get real good music of any kind to play because that would be a problem. What else? 2 minutes. Well, we've got something going on. I could hum. That would probably be a problem too. What else we got going on? This is sort of it. Let's turn the phone off. That'd be a good idea. It's already off. I was already thinking ahead. Maybe charge it up while we're doing this. Remote control goes away. Are we recording? Yep, there's our recordings down there. I'm recording also here on the TriCaster. And, of course, also recording on YouTube. If you are getting a reminder, an email, that is a completely different system than logging in on my website. So if you send me a note, if you're having problems logging in on the member login on my website, you can always send me an email and we'll figure it out. It's a pretty easy one. Yeah, not updating WordPress at the moment. My WordPress updates don't happen that fast. There's a lot of moving parts on my site that interact with each other. WordPress is sort of the core, but then there's a lot of hooks into it. Plus 4.7 has a new REST API that I want to look at and make sure I can turn off before people access that. I know. Why would I test stuff? Why would I try that? That doesn't even make sense. You know, just trying to keep things together here. What else are we doing? I think we're ready. I think we're doing a thing. I will do testing, and eventually it'll get installed, but there's no pressing reason for me at the moment to install a new version of WordPress. Unless there's a new feature in there I like, which I don't think there is. So there you go. There you go. All right, let's do a study group, shall we? This will be great. I don't even remember what the questions are. Is that important? Do we need that? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2016 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. My name is James Messer. I will be your host for the next hour of Network Plus Q&A. And then at the end of the hour, we finish the formal part of the study group. And then I open up the phone lines and I take questions in the chat room, and we talk about anything that happens to be on your mind. It doesn't have to be about certifications, but it very, very often is, and that's fine too. There's a lot that we've got going on here in the last study group of the calendar year. I've got a lot of different questions that I've created for this particular study group. So why don't we get started and get into things. Don't forget, you can find every video that I make for Network Plus, every minute of every video that I make for Network Plus is out and available for you to watch. And you can find all of those on my website at professormesser.com. Don't forget, of course, that we've got tweets that we send out. Yesterday, of course, was my Network Plus question of the week. Make sure you subscribe to that on professormesser.com. Of course, these study groups themselves are put out on YouTube along with all of the other Network Plus videos. And don't forget about the vouchers. Don't pay full price for your CompTIA certification exams. You can buy that voucher with a discount by using the discount code available on professormesser.com/vouchers. Well, many of you know you can watch every minute of every video online, but sometimes it's nice to have these videos offline. If you'd like to have a copy that you can take with you, along with MP3 files, along with my course notes, which we will talk about in just a bit, you can find out all about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. So that's something that maybe a number of you would like to have a copy of this, and I send you a little flash drive that has everything on there. So it's something you can always work on. I've also got questions that you can try and see if you know the answer to these Network Plus questions. I take all of the questions from our previous study groups and I put them in a Q&A format online, randomize them so that it's different every time. And I've got these 20 question blocks that you can go through. You can find out about those at professormesser.com/popquiz. Let's talk about today, because I have questions for you today. And you're going to answer the questions that I ask today, and here's how you answer them. You either open up a new browser window and go to the website socrative.com, www.socrative.com, and click on the student login and go to the room Professor Messer. Make sure you spell it right, PROFESSORMESSER. Now, you can also download an app for your mobile device. So if your mobile device is handy, it's something you're not using at the moment to watch the stream, you can load an app on there, and we will follow along with my mobile device, your mobile device. And all you have to do once you get to that room is just sit in the room. The questions will suddenly appear on your screen, and you'll be able to see them. In fact, you'll see one right now that says this: how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? And it goes through and asks you what you're doing there for your Network Plus certification. You can see 40% of you have answered, said less than 3 months, 22% 3 to 6 months. So almost 65% of you have been studying for only 6 months. It's about the average, I would think. A number of us take much longer to do certifications. That's certainly me. Or 16% of you already have your Network Plus certification. And sometime during this first hour, I will give the code that 15% or 16% of you would be able to use to be able to earn a continuing education unit. So listen closely. I'll give you both the instructions and give you the code that you will need to be able to earn that continuing education unit for this particular study group. And if you're watching this on the replay, you can earn it on the replay as well. You don't have to be here live for that. Well, if you're someone who is taking the Network Plus certification, you know that the N10006 is the latest version of the Network Plus certification as we are making this live. You should always check the CompTIA website to see what the latest version happens to be. This version was released on February the 28th of 2015. We expect that these are updated about every 3 years. That tends to be the update cycle that CompTIA tends to use. So I'm guessing that the later version, the newer version of this, is going to be available on February of 2018. So if you're currently studying for your Security Plus exam here at the end of 2016, you have plenty of time to study. So this is not something where you would ever wait to take a certification. In fact, you should never wait to get certified. You should always go through and make sure you know exactly what version of the exam is available and study for that exam and go take that exam. Something that's very important, that you don't wait around for the next version of anything. Certifications are just too important to have. Well, let's jump into the questions that I have for you today. I've taken a number of topics from the Network Plus exam. I take questions from you. I do a lot of different things that you have been telling me about, and I create questions for this. So here's the first question of the week, and it is a performance-based question, which means it is not a multiple choice question. This is something where you're going to need to put things together. In fact, this is what you would get, an example of a question you might get at the beginning of the actual Network Plus exam. These performance-based questions are presented before you get to the multiple choice questions. This question is, put these protocols in ascending order by TCP port number: POP3, IMAP4, SMTP, H323, and HTTPS. So I want them in ascending order, from lowest to highest, and I want to be able to know what order I would put these protocols in based on their TCP port number. So this is something you should be able to go through this very quickly. No, that's port number this port number this port number this, and you'd be able to fill those out. Now, as you imagine, if you go into your exam and the first thing you get is a question like this can really throw you. I'm the kind of test taker that I get very nervous when I go in to take an exam. It's something it's always been this way for me. I have that anxiety that comes through when I'm in a very nervous state. I go sit in the room. I've gone through the ID check. They've given me my blank sheet of plastic paper. I've asked them if I can use my fine tip erasable pen so I can write very small on the piece of paper. I go in the room. I've already filled out the things on that paper while I've had the time to answer the candidate agreement. I use that time to write all of my notes. And I get the first question, and it's a question like this. It's one where your brain isn't even in the mode yet. A lot of people, and I agree with this strategy, have been to jump ahead, because in the CompTIA exams, they are not exams that require you to go down a certain path. So you can jump around the exam from question to question. And a number of people I will recommend too is jump over the performance-based questions, go straight to the multiple choice, and kind of settle down. Get the adrenaline out of your system, get to where you can read the questions as they are going by. And then once you're at a comfortable place or you're done with the multiple choice, go back to the performance-based. I think doing the multiple choice might also jog your memory a bit so that when you're ready to go through the performance-based questions, it might be a little bit easier. So maybe some of you happen to know what this one happens to be. This is a pretty good question. I think that from a performance-based perspective, this is the type of thing you might be expected to do on the exam. And it might be a matching, it might be a fill in the blank, it might be an ordering question. So this is one where we're just trying to figure out what all of these different things are. And a number of you are answering this. Let's see how you did. Some of you even know the port numbers. You just gave me a list of port numbers as you go through here. So some of you are saying, oh, I don't remember what that one is. So here's 4 of them, but I don't know where this 5th one fits into the mix. You kind of have to know your stuff for this particular question. Let's see the answer to this question, because this is not a multiple choice. This is not one where you really have to worry about all of those pieces. So let's see how we did with this one. Here is the list of these, and it is one that shows this in ascending order. Do I have my yellow? There it is, my TCP 25 all the way up to TCP 1720 for H323. H323, just they are higher protocols. So you can almost automatically put the voice over IP protocols at a much higher level than the others, because you know that those are port numbers that came along later, well after some of these other protocols were already established. I always get mixed around with the mail protocols. So you also have to look at the mail protocols as well. The one that is the smallest number is the TCP port 25 for SMTP. That's a mail protocol, the simple mail transfer protocol. The next one highest would be TCP 110, which is POP3 for post office protocol version 3, and IMAP 4. So right off the bat, those 3 mail protocols are the first 3 we hit, the hardest ones for me personally to remember. One thing to also remember about these port numbers is that you have to not only know what they are, that POP3 happens to be the TCP 110, and that happens to be Post Office Protocol version 3, but you need to understand what that is. The Network Plus exam doesn't do a lot of definition checks. It does a lot of asking you how this works in the big picture of things. So getting hands-on is very useful. Actually configuring POP3 is very useful. Using POP3 is useful because then you have a real good understanding of what that is. Next on the list, HTTPS at TCP 443 and H323 is TCP 1720. So that is one where if you know your port numbers, you can put them in this list. You should be able to know them relatively quickly because you need to get through these questions very quickly. You could have a possible maximum of 90 questions on the exam. So you want to be sure that that you go through these very quickly because you only have 90 minutes. So it's one of those where use your time very, very wisely. Don't spend too much time on any one question. At least get through and answer as many questions as possible because you're not penalized for just guessing. Obviously, if you get it wrong, you don't get any points given to your score. But if you get it right, you get points. But if you get it wrong, they're none subtracted. So it doesn't hurt to try. Never leave a question blank on the CompTIA exam. I guess that's what I'm saying with those. So there's your answer. If you're trying to determine, here's our question, putting these protocols in ascending order by TCP port number for POP3, IMAP4, SMTP, H323, and HTTPS. Gosh, they were so close to almost being in that number, but I wouldn't have given you those in the right order, or would I? Of course not. Well, that's one. So somebody in the chat room, yep, finished my test with 3 minutes remaining. It's a tough exam to make it all the way through. So if you answered TCP 25 for SMTP, TCP 110 for POP3, IMAP4, HTTPS, and H323, you got that question already right. So already we're jumping up there and trying to get a number of these questions completed right off the bat. So hopefully that's helped you too with these. Well, I've got another question for you that is not multiple choice. Again, this is one where I'm trying to give you questions that will sort of help you along with the exam. I want to know, what connector is this? There's a picture of what that connector is. I'm not giving you multiple choice on this. You need to know the name of the connector. This is something that could very possibly be asked of you. This one might be asked with a number of connectors on the screen and you have to match them up to each other. Maybe you have to know what the connector happens to be. So put this into your Socrative and be able to do that. Here's a better picture of this connector. Maybe that will help a bit. In the chat room, they're asking, what if you get one of these multiple choice or one of these performance-based questions partially correct? Will they give you half points? On CompTIA's website, they have a frequently asked question about this very thing because that is one of the frequently asked questions that I have seen. And they have said in that frequently asked question answer that for the vast majority of their performance-based questions, there are no partial credits. There are a very rare set of occasions where partial credit is given, but for the most part, it doesn't look like they hand out a lot of partial credit. So you either get it right or you do not get it right. So you really have to know these performance-based questions to be able to get there. So a lot of you are answering as it goes by, well, it's a fiber connector. That's all I know, that it's fiber. Well, that is sort of an obvious one there. It's definitely not a copper connector. So there's your hint of the day for that one. It is a fiber connector. It is not a coaxial connector. And a lot of you, I think, got this one right. If we go through the list of who got this right, nope, yes. Someone just said fiber. Someone said the type of connector, which is a bayonet type connector, a BNC type connector on there. But I'm looking for the exact type of this particular device. And we'll just jump into it. This happens to be a straight tip connector. It does have a bayonet on it. That bayonet is one where you push the connector in and there's a slight twist, maybe an eighth or a quarter twist, and it locks in place. You often see these with fiber connectors. You often see them with more professional audio and video connectors because you can't accidentally pull it out of its connector. If you yanked on it so hard to try to get it out of that connector, you'd actually pull it out of the connector itself. You'd break that particular connection. So you can't accidentally walk by and have these fall out of the connector. And with fiber, that's pretty important. If it's a fiber connection, it's probably a pretty important connection to have up and running all the time. So this is one where definitely you want to plug it in and give it a little twist. Obviously, to get it out of the connector, we have to untwist it just that little bit and then pull straight out again. So these straight tip connectors are not as common as you might expect. These are one of the very early types of fiber connectors that we used. We still see them used on a number of devices, but they're relatively large in the size, the actual size of the connector. And I say relative, they're not enormous as they are, but compared to some of the other type of fiber connectors you have these days, this is relatively large. So a number of manufacturers have used smaller fiber connectors in their devices because they can put more connectors into a single physical place. So that's useful. But you will still find a number of devices and number of components out there using these straight tip because they have that nice bayonet connector. Some of those smaller connections are simply click-ins, and they don't have that same type of putting it in and locking it in place that this BNC has on it. So if you are looking at putting in a fiber connector, it's not going anywhere, this ST connector may be the right one to use. And if you answered ST, a lot of you said ST, some of you said LC. It is not LC connector. It is fiber optic, but I was looking for the exact fiber type. Some of you did mention it was a bayonet connector, but neglected to mention it was an ST connector. And it does sort of look like thin net, doesn't it, with that BNC on there, but that is not thin net. Going way back to some of the earlier networking, you don't need to know what thin net is for the Network Plus exam any longer, fortunately, and being able to work with that. For those of you following along on YouTube, I'm answering these chat questions on ProfessorMesser.com/live, and there is a live event chat. That's the name of the chat that you can join. That's the one I'm looking at on my screen. So if you answered ST connector with that one, you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another question. I've got one. I think finally we're back to multiple choice. Isn't that nice? Let's see if we really are. Yes. So the question is, which of these would be the best reason to use port mirroring? One of these is going to be the best reason to use something called port mirroring. And your possible answers are, here they are. And in this list, you can see there's a number of answers that you can work through. The possible answers are capture packets during a troubleshooting session, create redundant links across multiple physical switches, increase the bandwidth between multiple switches, send traffic over multiple routed links, and increase the usable distance for fiber connections. So one of those is going to be the right question for this. Maybe you happen to know and are familiar with port mirroring and you've used it before. The answer probably jumps right out at you. But if you have not used port mirroring before, then this may be something you need to learn more about. Hopefully you have this and being able to work through it. If you happen to know what the answer is, go to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer. Please do not answer in the chat room. We're going to all try to figure this out on our own as if we were sitting there on the exam ready to take this, and maybe we would know what the answer happens to be. I'm going to sneak a peek at this. I try to write these questions so that they are not completely something that is an answer and a definition. This is an example of that, where you have to understand how this technology is used. And I try to make it so that I want at least 50% of the folks to get this one right. So I shoot for a 50% number. And if I do that, maybe I'm in good shape with getting that. Let's see how we did with this question. Which of these would be the best reason to use port mirroring? Well, 60% said capture packets during a troubleshooting session. That one happens to be not only the majority, but in this case, a large difference over what the next answer would be, which is 26% saying create redundant links across multiple physical switches. And then single digits for increasing bandwidth, for sending traffic, and increasing the usable distance for fiber connections. So which one of these would be the best reason to use port mirroring? How would I end up taking and using this technology? This actually comes in extremely handy if you're trying to troubleshoot. On a switched network, all communication is between two devices. It's between really one device and the switch. You can't plug into another port on a switch somewhere with a protocol analyzer or some kind of monitoring device and see what's happening everywhere else. None of those frames are directed to you. Those frames always go directly to the other device that's on the switch. It's very different than the old days when we had hubs, where you could plug in and you could see all of the communication going on the network all the time. But obviously, we don't have that luxury if we're trying to troubleshoot. So fortunately, a number of these switches that you might be able to use have a feature called port mirroring. Cisco, for instance, calls this a SPAN, a switched port analyzer. Other companies use other names for this. It just depends on the manufacturer and how they implement it. But boy, what a great feature, because I can plug in a device to do protocol analysis. I can capture packets. I can monitor network communication. And I can say anything that's going to and from a particular device, send me a copy of that traffic. Obviously, this is something that only the administrator of the switch would ever do. There's no reason for someone who's not the administrator to be able to have this functionality, because obviously there's a significant security issue associated with this. You don't want anybody just to be able to perform any type of port mirroring on a switch. So you can also, I've seen capabilities on certain switches that will port mirror an entire VLAN from a number of ports all the way down to a single analyzer. There's obviously some physics involved with this. You don't want to overload the downstream that's coming down to your protocol analysis device. But boy, this can really be useful if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem, trying to look at response times for an application. Is the problem with the application? Is the problem with the network? And being able to have this capability of looking into what's happening is pretty important. Not all switches support this. So it becomes very important that if you're planning to implement a switch in an environment where it's important for you to be able to perform a packet capture, you want to be sure your switch supports this port mirroring functionality. So that's one where when I worked many, many years for a protocol analysis company, this port mirroring capability was extremely important. If we didn't have a port mirror, we'd often have to break a link and put a physical tap into the middle of the connection just so we could see everything going to and from that device. And obviously we're breaking the connection. It's a disruption of service. We have to plug it in. There's a lot that goes into installing one of those taps. It's not something you'd like to do. With port mirror, it's all done in the software of the switch. Makes it very, very easy for that to happen. So if you answered A, capture packets during a troubleshooting session, those 54% of you got that one absolutely right. Creating redundant links across multiple physical switches is not a port mirror. That's more of a link aggregation or a lag. So that's something where you need to keep in mind when you're using these different capabilities of a switch, exactly what those functions do and how they operate. Again, if you answered A, capture packets during a troubleshooting session, you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. There are a lot of ports and protocols and details about port mirroring and knowing about topologies and understanding security and much more on the Network Plus exam. And the Network Plus exam, probably more than any other, has the largest number of acronyms you have to remember. There's an enormous amount of things that you have to keep in your head to be able to answer on the actual exam. What I've done is take all of the information from all of my videos, and I've created a set of notes. You can, of course, go through the videos yourself, take the notes yourself, write down copies of those images and the diagrams that I've created, but I've already done it for you. I put it into a single PDF file that you can download immediately from my website for only $10. And you can find this at professormesser.com/NPCN, Network Plus Course Notes. The course notes themselves they're big. There's 15 pages of course notes. This is a copy of the PDF, and I try to put as much in there, everything that's important from all of my videos, a lot of the text, almost all of the graphics, all of the tables, all of the details, they're all in here in the course notes. And another nice part of this is that the course notes and everything that people, all the money that you're spending on these course notes goes back to keeping the website running as well. That's another important part of this. I wouldn't be able to do this without your support of it. So thanks so much for your support of these course notes and having those course notes purchased. And hopefully it's something that's helped you when you're preparing for your Network Plus exam. It doesn't replace videos. It doesn't replace your book. When you're finally ready to sit down and do that last bit of studying for exam, hopefully that's come in really handy for you as well. Something very useful to have. And I want to thank you for your support. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. Let's do another question. Here's another one I've got ready for you. Which of the following would be the best use of SHA? SHA? Which would be the best use of SHA? Would it be that we would need to encrypt a file sent across an insecure network? We need to validate the identification of a sending party. We need to transfer a shared password between two devices. We need to encrypt the contents of an entire USB flash drive, or we need to create an encrypted tunnel between two locations. One of these is clearly the best use of SHA. What's interesting about this is that I could probably find SHA being used in multiple answers. This is something you'll see on the CompTIA exam as well, is that some of these could be a correct answer, but they didn't ask you every possible instance of the use of SHA. It asks which of the following would be the best use of this. So make sure you look at all of the answers and really determine which one is the best answer to be able to use. Maybe you can go through this list yourself and stop Googling SHA. Some of you are Googling it right now. I can feel it. I'm looking at the numbers as people are answering and how quickly they go up. And I know when they don't go up very quick, you're spending all of your time in the Google. Well, your Google's not going to help you too much on this one because you have to know how it's used and then apply it back to the answers I've given. Maybe Google will help you a little bit. But you should not trust the Google. You should sit and take these questions like you've walked into the exam and be able to answer the questions as if it was live on and you were taking it right now. And this counted for an actual score. Let's see if we can remember what it is. Maybe you know what it happens to be. And if you do, you can go to Socrative.com to click the student login and go to the room name Professor Messer. You'll answer this one as well. I'm looking at the answers that are coming through, and it's an interesting set today, trying to figure out what this would help with. What would this do for me? How could I use SHA on my note? You've probably used it before. You probably used it today. That's a little bit too much of a hint. Let's see how we did with this one. Which would be the best use of SHA? How do we do? Well, we're torn. We're tied. We got an effective tie. 38% said validate the identification of a sending party. 36%, I guess you could say that's in second place, but really it's a pretty much a tie, which is encrypt a file sent across an insecure network. And 15% said create an encrypted tunnel between two locations. Maybe you know also single digits for transferring a shared password between two devices and encrypting the contents of an entire USB flash drive. Well, one of the things you have to know, and this is one that becomes pretty important when you start working through these particular questions, is what SHA happens to be. So it's important as you're answering this question and trying to figure out, you should know first, what is SHA? And at the very, very basic functionality of SHA is that it's a hashing algorithm. You should know the difference absolutely between a hashing algorithm and an encryption of something. So that becomes pretty important. The hashing and encryption are two very different things. They are very similarly related. They are two very different things in how they operate. So if you already know that SHA is a hashing algorithm, a lot of the questions dealing with encryption, you can automatically say that, well, that doesn't apply to what we're doing. One nice thing about hashing is that when you create a hash from a plain text, from a file, from something, you're creating a hash of that. It creates generally a fixed field, a fixed length, a piece of information called the hash. And we're going to look at some of these in just a moment. But you can't go backwards. You can't take the hash and somehow create the original message, because this is what we call a message digest. It's not the encrypted form of the original. It's simply, think of it as a fingerprint of the original so that you can match those things up later. This is used to store passwords, for example. So you can store a password and it takes a hash of what you typed in. You could type a very long password and it takes a hash. So if you type that very long password again and you perform the same algorithm, those two hashes should match up. Very commonly using hashes for digital signatures as well. The idea here is that if you have a hash that you've created, that it's very unique to the information that you've hashed. So it's something that's pretty important. You don't want these hashes to collide with each other. You don't want messages that are different having exactly the same hash. You want to avoid that at all costs. Well, as we mentioned here, the hash we were talking about is the secure hash algorithm. It's SHA. It's something that was created in the United States by the National Security Agency. This is something that the first version of this was pretty widely used, SHA-1. The digest itself was 160 bits long, so not incredibly long in today's terms. The problem is that we found a way to get collisions. And as I mentioned, collisions is a bad thing when we're talking about hashes. We don't want to ever have collisions, but this particular algorithm had a flaw that in certain cases could create collisions, could create the same hash from different types of plain text. So, of course, we corrected it. We fixed it. We came up with SHA-2. This is the one that's kind of preferred these days, especially on the government. We never want to have this type of collision. So we got rid of SHA-1 completely. If you're using SHA today, hopefully you're using something like SHA-2. You can have up to 512-bit digests, which are nice long digests to be able to hash with. We haven't found any collision problems with SHA-2. Hopefully that one's been resolved. And this is something that we really don't see SHA-1 being used much anymore because of those previous issues. So if we go back to our list of which of the following would be the best use of SHA, well, we can have A is encrypt a file sent across an insecure network. SHA does not encrypt files. So we know that that's not the right answer. We look at transferring a shared password between two devices. Well, transferring a shared password between two devices, something that is shared, we could use SHA, as I mentioned, as a go-between for this. That's not our best answer on this one. Encrypting the contents of an entire USB drive, encryption is not what we're looking at. Create an encrypted tunnel, that is not what we're looking at. The correct answer is the one we had the most number of responses. Validate the identification of a sending party. It's very commonly used, for example, in things like the certificates that we use on websites. So if you're on the Professor Messer website, you're on an encrypted page, the way that your browser makes sure that this page is something that can be trusted is it looks at the signature of the certificate that's on my web server. That certificate is signed or digitally signature. The digital signature that's there is very often something using SHA to be able to do that. So it's something that's very useful. We certainly use it for integrity. We can use it in some very specific cases to be able to even know exactly who it came from. So that's something nice with the digital signatures is not only that we know we have the right certificate, we know exactly who created that certificate and we can verify it. So validating the identification of a sending party, something that is very commonly done with SHA, something that is done all the time when we're looking at the certificates on our web server. So that is the correct answer. B in this case would be the best use of SHA to validate the identification of a sending party to be able to do that. I've got some great videos on my website where I actually perform some hashes. So I go through taking a string of text and I create a hash of it. And then I change one character in that string of text and I perform the exact same hashing algorithm and I get a completely different hash of that. So it's something you can go through and look to be able to work with those. Pretty interesting technology. It's one we use all the time. It is a foundation of the security that we have on this web and internet communication. Pretty nice thing to have there to be able to work through it. Let's look at another question, shall we? Let's go to this question, which asks, which of these would be the best way to minimize crosstalk? This is one so now we have to know what crosstalk is. But not only do we have to know what crosstalk is, we have to know how to minimize crosstalk. And I have some options for you. Which of these would be the best way to minimize crosstalk? We would maintain your cable twists, use full duplex instead of half duplex links, minimize the number of devices per subnet, use SFP interfaces on your switch, or disable all unused switch ports. One of these is going to be the best way to minimize crosstalk. Maybe you know what it is and be able to work with crosstalk. If you do, you can go to Socrative.com to the room named Professor Messer. You'll be able to answer this question as well. I think some of you have dealt with crosstalk before. This might be an easier one than the hashing question you had earlier. Trying to mix them up a little bit and have that there. we start looking at the possible answers, maybe that even jumps out at you. This is a good example of some of the things you can do on the exam, is going through the questions, try to figure out which ones are definitely not the right answer. Maybe you can absolutely figure all of those pieces out when you're working through them. Maybe you happen to know which ones are definitely wrong and get rid of those questions immediately. That might help you out as you're stepping through all of these different options. So let's see how we did with minimizing crosstalk. Maybe you minimized crosstalk in your network. And let's see what our answers were. Well, 75%, a vast majority over anybody else, said to maintain your cable twist, but 14% said use full duplex instead of half duplex links. Maybe that's something we can work about. 7% said minimize the number of devices per subnet. 6% said disable all unused switch ports. And 2% said use SFP interfaces on our switch. But only one of these is going to tell us how we can minimize crosstalk. And crosstalk is something that you'll, of course, need to be familiar with if you're working on any network. Crosstalk is when you have a communication going over circuit and you can hear that there's a signal coming from a completely different circuit. That's something it's bad. You don't want that to happen when you're working through this. We would prefer indeed to avoid any of the leaking of that signal. If it's an analog communication, like over an analog phone line, you can hear somebody else talking on another line, but they're not physically connected to your line. Got a little bit of it there, being able to work through that. There is also the ability to measure how much crosstalk there is to have that there. Maybe it's one where if you start looking at the cable testers that are out there, they're very good cable testers, will tell you exactly how much that signal is leaking between those different pairs in your cable. Crosstalk, there's different kinds. So there's a near end crosstalk where you measure the interference that you're getting at the transmitting end, the near end of the communication. You also have far end crosstalk that you can measure at the far distance. Once you've sent that signal all the way down the line, how bad was the interference? So whenever you're dealing with crosstalk, it's obviously a problem. It is an interference. People in the chat room, is this interference? It absolutely is interference. It's these signals interfering with each other and leaking through. There will always be, on these twisted pair networks where we have all of these different wires so close to each other, there will always be some level of crosstalk. You'll never get it down to zero. Laws of physics apply here. But you could get it so that it is minimized enough so that it does not affect the overall performance of the data that you're sending over those connections. So if you're trying to troubleshoot crosstalk, one of the ways you can do this is to have a look at your wires. It's always going to be a wiring issue. So check the crimp. Here's a good example for in this view, get a better picture of this image. So that's a bad crimp there. We've got wires that are sticking out of the cable connector. Our RJ45 there is not really tightened up to the sheath that's around it. The twists have been undone. You want to keep those twists in place. It's the twists that help us keep and minimize the amount of interference over these. That's why in category 6A cable, they increased the diameter of the cable itself. It's a bigger cable. They actually put in between all of those wires something to separate the wires inside of the cable itself to avoid crosstalk as it was going through. So the cables aren't close to each other. They're farther away from each other in that same cable sheath. So make sure you have a good tester. Ultimately, that's what it's going to take to troubleshoot these kinds of problems. Make sure that you know that you have a good tester. I think that's one of the most important things you can absolutely do on a big network, where you have to make sure that these communications, that these connectors are going to work. This is a good way to do it. So make sure you've gone through all of your connectors and you have a good tester. If you don't have a good tester, because these are relatively expensive devices to be able to do that, but if you don't have a good tester, it's very often you can rent a tester or rent a person with the tester to be able to test all of those. So that becomes pretty important to be able to work through those. Maybe you have been working through those or trying to get your network running properly. It's always good to have your network tested for this. So let's look at the possible answers that we have here. Obviously here, the 67% of you definitely knew what you were talking about from a crosstalk perspective. If you maintain your cable twists, you will minimize the amount of crosstalk and the amount of interference that's on your network. You could also minimize how close the wires are to each other. That's another way to minimize crosstalk. Full duplex and half duplex has nothing to do with crosstalk. The number of devices per subnet have nothing to do with crosstalk. This is about the cabling itself. Using SFP interfaces in your switch. Well, SFP is just a modular interface. It doesn't change the way that physics works. So putting a different kind of interface in your switch can't help unless you're plugging in fiber, which is not what it said. It said to use SFP interfaces. And disabling all unused switch ports. That is one where that won't help you either. Crosstalk is all about that wire and being able to work through the problems or the issues associated with that wire. So if you answered A, maintain your cable twist, you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. There is a lot on the Network Plus exam. A lot that's on the exam is working with equipment you may have never touched before. A lot of it may be working with technologies that you've never had to deal with before. But there are some labs that you can use in your browser where you can use full-blown Windows systems, routers, switches, and be able to learn the things you need to know to be able to pass that hands-on performance-based part of your exam. And I think the more hands-on you get with any of these technologies, the better you're going to do on the exam overall. My friends at GTS Learning have exactly what you need. It's the GTS Learning Live Labs. This is something you can use to work on a real system. It's all done through a remote desktop. It's all done inside of your browser. There's no additional software that you have to load. And it's something that makes it very easy to be able to use these technologies. In fact, I have their Network Plus lab right here, and they've got all of these different labs that are built into this. Everything from configuring DHCP to working with virtual machines, understanding how software as a service works, VPNs, troubleshooting DNS. That's one where I think I've started this one before, but that might be a good one to go through. I'm going to click this lab, and it says first thing I can do is power on the devices. There's a domain controller, power it on. There's a Windows 7 device, I can power it on. Let's power on both of those. I've got some other gateways, routers that are in here. They're all here in this configuration, and they've all got a lab set up for me to be able to use. So all of this is here and on the screen and ready to go. I don't have to do anything extra. I don't have to load anything extra, and all the labs take me through a step-by-step on what I have to do on this particular lab. We'll go to the next page of this lab, and it says I need to troubleshoot. We're going to reconfigure some IP addresses, and it takes me step-by-step through the screenshots to be able to do this. One nice thing about it is that it's always available. It's in my browser, and there's a special price that you can get if you go to my website. It's normally $169, but if you are using this link, which is professormesser.com/netlabs, folks at GTS Learning give you a discount right off the top down to $109. So if you're someone who doesn't want to set up all of this equipment in your studio, in your lab, at home, on the floor, wherever it happens to be, you can do all of this right here in the live labs. And it makes it very, very simple for you to be able to go through and do all of this without having to have any equipment and be able to access it really from anywhere. Very useful to have those capabilities there. I've got a number of these machines in this virtual environment I use whenever I'm building out these courses because they're full-blown Windows systems, they're full-blown Linux systems. They're not a simulation, they're a virtual machine. You're using a full live environment. So you've got complete control over what's going on. And I find it very easy to be able to step through them and be able to use the capabilities that are there. I think it's one where I kind of like having that. All of those available and being able to work through them. So if that's something you think might help you, have a look at the labs that they have at professormesser.com/netlabs, and maybe those labs will help you as well. There is a lot on the exam dealing with sort of ethereal topics that have no physicality to them. And so I wanted to switch from live labs, which are very physical, to a question that maybe is not exactly physical. It's one that gives us a little bit more conceptual view of the world, and that's dealing with OSI models. So the question I have for you is a kind of a fill in the blank. I'm not giving you multiple choice on this one. The question is, what layer of the OSI model is most commonly associated with the web browser? Maybe you know what this one is. So you've got to know what the layer is. Some of you are even telling me the name of the layer, which is even great. Some of you are just giving me the number of the layer, which is fine. I'll accept that as a correct answer. Some of you happen to know what the name of the layer happens to be. Maybe you know by looking at all of these pieces. The difference is the OSI model and being able to work through it. A lot of people tell me in the chat room, I've got emails from people that say, why are you teaching this? Nobody uses this. This is an outdated form of communication, and you could not be more incorrect. We use OSI model all the time. So previous to doing this full time, I worked for a next generation firewall company as a systems engineer. I was in the largest networks in the world, working with the security professionals of those networks and of those companies. And we use the OSI model all the time, multiple times in a single meeting. We're describing the way that technologies work. We're describing where things are working in their environment. We're describing how things are operating. And using OSI model is something where everybody now knows what you're talking about. Everybody knows when you talk about the OSI layer 3, what different components that we're dealing with on the network that work at that layer. Becomes extremely useful. And I will agree, in the chat room, Nate even says, this is kind of hard to grasp. This was one of the more difficult things to figure out. You're absolutely right, because it's not real. You can't touch it. It's not something that you can absolutely even point and say this is absolutely the way it fits, because it's a model. It's something that helps describe the process, but it's not a set of zeros and ones that are always there and being able to work through. So you want to be sure that when you're working through the OSI model, you understand at a very broad level the way these things happen to work. So if I scroll through the answers I've gotten so far, almost everybody has gotten this one right. I would say 90% of you know this one pretty well. Let's step through this OSI model and being able to use this. So in the chat room, they're even saying, but no, this is, what about the TCP/IP model? Nobody talks about the TCP/IP model the way we talk about OSI. There are two types of models, and you'll see them both in the Network Plus and in other things as well. The TCP/IP model certainly speaks well to TCP/IP and how it operates, but in common parlance and common conversation with other networking professionals, we all use the OSI model as the method to communicate. It's just how it has always worked out. Layer 1 at the very bottom layers where the cable are, it's the physical layers, the signal of what's going across the network. Layer 2 is usually where we put switches. We talk about frame forwarding. We're talking about communicating things at a MAC address level with Ethernet. Then certainly layer 2 fits there. Layer 3 is all about IP addresses. So if you're routing traffic, you're talking about routers, you're talking about anything happening at layer 3. Layer 4 is the TCP port number or the UDP port number. Technically, we call that a TCP segment and a UDP datagram. That's what the data piece is always called. So when you talk about what is the port number of that application, that's where it fits into that layer 4. Layer 5 and being able to set up a session between two devices. Not all communications have the session setup and session teardown above layer 4, but if you're using something like a tunneling protocol over a VPN, that's one way to do it. And if I click the right buttons here, you'll even be able to see the rest of this. Layer 6, the presentation layer, is something that's going to be a go-between between the application and your eyes. Very commonly, we describe encryption technologies going here because just before you happen to see what's going on with the application, it has to be decrypted so you can see what's happening with that particular app. And then finally, up at layer 7, I commonly say this is where your eyes are. This is the application itself. It's you using the system. It's you looking at the web browser. So when I talk about a web browser, I think most of you were with me on this one. If you're trying to figure out where the web browser fits into the OSI model, well, that's what we're viewing with our eyes. So that's where it fits into this layer 7. Now, we can get into, and you will have people that like to argue the points of the OSI model. But wait, the web browser does encryption and decryption. So there's a layer 6 part that's associated with this. And part of this, if you are in your browser and you're setting up a tunnel, there's a link and a hook down to the session setup. So there's a layer 5 component to this as well. And you can absolutely argue that. And you should think about things that way as well. But when we talk about very broadly where the browser sits. We are most often talking about layer 7 and being able to work through those. The application itself, the browser is the application and the way that it's working. So whenever somebody says, I'm having a problem with the browser, you can say, oh, it's an OSI layer 7 issue. And if you answered OSI layer 7 for this question, you got this one absolutely correct. Well, let's talk about devices on the network. Let's talk about, in this particular case, a switch. And the question I have for you is about how switches operate. The question specifically is, which of these is used by a switch to make a forwarding decision? Is it a MAC address, an IP address, a port number, a list of load-balanced servers, or the fastest interface speed? One of these is used by a switch to make a forwarding decision. That's one absolutely that you need to understand as you're looking at what a network can do. You need to know what these switches think about when they are making a forwarding decision. What is the process to be able to do this? In the chat room, people are saying, do you mean a dumb switch? I mean any switch. I mean a switch that has questionable intelligence. I mean a switch that has a complete knowledge and grasp of multiple languages. I mean a switch that has a very specific understanding of fine wines. I mean any switch. And this is one of these questions, by the way, that always when you're looking at switches, there is something when we talk about a switching environment, this is what we're talking about. You should always understand what these switches are capable of, what they're doing, how they operate. I think most of you even know this. Yeah, I want the wine switch. That would be a nice one to have, wouldn't it? But no, they don't have a wine. Well, they do have a wine switch, but it's something separate. You add it on. It's that extra piece. There's always something extra on there and being able to work through it. Let's talk about switches and what they do. Well, first, let's look and see how we did. Which of these is used? How do we do? Well, 68% said MAC address, which if you had to phone a friend, if you had to ask the audience, I guess that's the answer we'd get. But 14% said port number, 13% said IP address. Hardly anybody said list of load-balanced servers and the fastest interface speed. So what would it be if we're talking about switches? Well, switches are fantastic devices. They are very fast devices. We very commonly refer to switches as line rate network devices, which means they will process and send traffic through the network with no noticeable delay, no discernible delay whatsoever. And they will send it at the fastest possible speed your network can handle. This is because a lot of this forwarding decision, a lot of the switching that's taking place is all happening in hardware. It's not relying on any software to do this. It does this by using ASICs. You'll see that as a selling point with many devices. Oh, this device is fast because it does everything in ASIC. And that's this application-specific integrated circuit that is effectively taking the knowledge of how to work and sticking it in hardware so it runs very, very, very fast and being able to work through there. The switches themselves are OSI layer 2 devices. It forwards information based on a data link address. That's layer 2 of the OSI model is the data link layer, the DLC layer. And in an Ethernet environment, if you're talking about the data link layer, it's a MAC address. And when you're talking about a WAN, you don't have a MAC address. You have a DCE and a DTE or DLCI or whatever mechanism that wide area network uses to communicate at layer 2. But when we're talking about an Ethernet network, which obviously is the vast majority of the networks that we have out here today, those particular networks have a MAC address at layer 2. And that's exactly what the switches are doing. They're deciding where traffic goes based on the MAC address. They're making a forwarding decision of where traffic goes based solely on the MAC address. If it's a switch, it forwards based on where the destination MAC address happens to live. That is really it. There are some switches out there that you'll hear called layer 3 switches or multi-layer switches. And what these really are, very similar to the Soho router you might have at home, your wireless router that you might have at home, is there's not only a switch in that device, but there's also a router in that device. And in fact, in your Soho router, there's also an access point in that device. There's also a firewall in that device. There's a lot going on there. So you'll sometimes hear switches talked about as multi-layer switches or layer 3 switches, but that really doesn't change the way the switching is happening. That really is just describing how people have stacked on these additional capabilities on top of the switch itself. The switching function is still operating at layer 2. The switching function is still making forwarding decisions based on the MAC address. Nothing changes because you added more stuff on top of the switch and made a Frankenstein of it. It's still switching. It's still doing layer 2. If it's a layer 3 switch, that means there's also a router in there too. The switch could send things up to the router, and the router could make its forwarding decisions based on layer 3. But then when it comes back down to do the actual switching, it needs to operate at layer 2. That's exactly what happens. That's one where if you are working through switches and being able to figure it out, that becomes pretty important. So the answer here, what is used by a switch to make a forwarding decision? The answer is MAC address. The 68% of you got that one absolutely right. And if you are watching this study group to be able to earn continuing education units, that's your special word of the month is MAC address. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link right there. And in that Contact Us link, you want to put your name, your email address. Make sure you get those right because that's what goes on the digital certificate that I'm sending you. Then you want to put that you watched the December 2016 Network Plus study group and that the special secret code word of the month is MAC address. These come directly to me. They come to my inbox. So if you want to put anything else in there, any other comments or messages, you're welcome to do that as well. And put them right into that message, and I'll see them as they come through. Be able to work through all of those pieces. This is one where the MAC address part of the switch becomes extremely important. And then when you get out of the Network Plus, you go to the next set of networking certifications you work on. It will most likely be something dealing with routers and switches. That's the most logical point people go to, and you'll be learning a lot about MAC addresses that are in these switches. Well, I think we've got some time to get one more of these questions in. This question deals with wireless networks. So here is the wireless network question I have for you. Which of these wireless antenna types would be the best choice for the ceiling in the middle of a warehouse? This might be a question you're presented with as a network professional. Hey, we've got a new project going on. We just built a new warehouse. We need to now provide wireless access inside of the warehouse. We need to put an antenna up in the warehouse. What should we put there? Now you have to answer. And fortunately, I have some options for you. Those possible options are parabolic, loop, Yagi, dipole, omnidirectional. One of those will be the best choice. Again, you could probably put 1 or 2 or 3 of these in the ceiling of there. But no, there's only one that is going to be the best choice for the ceiling in the middle of the warehouse. If you think you know what the best choice is, you can answer at Socrative.com, click the student login, and answer in the room, Professor Messer. And folks in the chat room still talking about the OSI model. There is no OSI model layer 0. No. We're talking about layer 1 of the OSI model, which is the first layer. We're really talking about the signal. Some people refer to it as the cabling, and I guess that's because the signal is on the cable and the signal is on the fiber. So when you have a layer 1 problem, it's usually a physical layer, and they think it's something that's really physical. So I think that's reasonable to be able to do that. But maybe you're able to make that happen as well. This is one where knowing the OSI model really can help you with that. So maybe this question, I'm going to take a sneak peek. A lot of you already answered this one and have this one. I think some of you have done this before and working through these particular answers. If we see how we did, well, you can see omnidirectional, 82% of what people said. Now, why would that be the case, though, for omnidirectional? Well, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? We have a big warehouse, and we want to be able to cover everything in the warehouse. There's not going to be a directed stream of communication. We don't really need a high gain antenna. We're not going over an enormous distance. It's a warehouse. We're not going over a very large area. So this is in fact one of the most common types of communications, probably the type of antenna you have on your small office, home office router, in fact, and being able to work through it. This is one that sends the signal Generally, it's evenly distributed. That's not exactly true, but it's mostly true with these types of patterns that you would have on these antennas. And because you need coverage in all directions of the warehouse, it's a good one to have. There's some antennas that can give you more of the signal in the front and less of the signal in the back. That's not what we want either. We want something that's really going to be omnidirectional, and being able to work through that. So we're not really focusing a signal. That's really how we're working through these and being able to work through all of those pieces. And I think that's a good example of being able to work through all of those. This is one where if you answered E, omnidirectional, then you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that and being able to work through all of those pieces of that question. It's a pretty obvious question that you might run into, being able to work with them. All of these questions and everything you need to know are in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure that you go to the CompTIA exam objective section of the CompTIA website. Go to the Google machine and type in CompTIA exam objectives, or go to professormesser.com/objectives. And that will take you to a page on the CompTIA website to download these objectives. Make sure you download them. They are full of everything you need to know. If you don't have these objectives, you're doing yourself a disservice. They really do tell you every single topic you need to know for the exam. And if you know everything that is in these objectives, you will easily pass the Network Plus exam. That's how detailed they are. Make sure you go through and you understand everything that's in there on those exam objectives. It's the number one tip that I can give you before you go in to start studying and before you walk in to take your exam. Make sure you have these exam objectives. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. This is the end of, it's not going to be 2016. Look, we're going to edit on the fly. See, that's my first problem. See, it's not a check that I'm writing. We don't do that anymore, do we? We don't write checks. It's going to instead be 2017. There we go. The next Network Plus study group, January 11th, 2017. I do one of these study groups almost every week. Next week will be Security Plus. Last week was A Plus. You can always come back next week for the Security Plus. But if you're someone who's focused on Network Plus, you can come back on January the 11th. We'll do another one of these live events and being able to work through them. This study group, by the way, is one that you can watch all the replays. If you're watching the replay and we're well past January 11th, 2017, you can always find out when the next event is going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar, or simply click the calendar link at the top of the website, and they'll tell you everything you need to know about the next event. But alas, we have come to the end of another study group, at least the formal study group. You're welcome to stick around for the next hour or so, where I'm just going to open up the phone lines and we'll just chat about whatever you'd like to talk about. But of course, there's always something going on. You can get our weekly Network Plus question of the week, our pop quiz question of the week at professormesser.com/Twitter. You can sign up on the website for that. Don't forget about the course notes. That may be something that can help you. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/NPCN. I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning. They have the Net Labs available, and being able to work through those are very useful and something you may be able to work through as well. Don't forget also that we've got A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups. I'd love to do more study groups. So maybe a number of you have some ideas of what we can work on. And of course, I wouldn't be able to do the study groups without you, something that is the most important part. Otherwise, I'd be asking questions and answering them all for myself. So thank you for joining me on this live event. Thank you for watching the replays. Thank you for your support of the course notes and of the website. I could not thank you enough. It's been a fantastic year for us here at Messer Studios, and you're an enormous part of that. Thank you so much. Well, that comes to the end, it looks like, of another Network Plus study group. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone. My, that did go fast, didn't it? That was one that was zippy. That was zippy. It went right through. The link for 10% off is professormesser.com/vouchers. professormesser.com/vouchers. IPv6 does do subnetting, although it's not the same type of thing as we have with IPv4. Most everybody has a /64, and you just dole out the /64s. But there is some subnetting there. And there's types of subnetting you need to understand about IPv6 and how it operates. Because when we describe certain multicast addresses or certain other types of addresses in IPv6, it's useful to know why there's a slash there and a weird number for those. Be able to work through it. Get some coffee in me. Let's get the phone lines open for those of you who'd like to. I'm also taking questions in the live event chat. Take questions there as well. I don't have the phone line open yet, though, so let's get the phone line open. I need to call in and get that ready. But I need to call in and get it ready here. You can tell that I have no producer. Yeah, I need to join that subreddit for IPv6. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Listen to me. Wouldn't that be great? That'd be fantastic. Really? In IPv6? This is why Mrs. Professor Messer wonders about me. IPv6 subreddit, that'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. We have to type something in. And I'll type that, and I'll hit this thing.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Again, redundant.
Welcome, host.
Welcome.
Are now in the host room.
I am in the host room. Welcome. And let's see, I do have a phone number. There it is. If you'd like to call in, you're more than welcome to, or answer questions in the chat room as well. But if you'd like to call in, it's 855-785-7545, a toll-free number in the United States, and Skype-free over Skype with the +1 855-785-RJ45. You can call in on the studio line. I should look at that. Did I complete my subnetting in 7 seconds videos? I completed all of the content. I plan on shooting actually this week. It's one of those. Hopefully I have it done. It's like 5 or 6 or 7 videos it turned out to be. And it actually works. Being able to subnet in 7 seconds with no math. So I'm looking forward to getting that down. It's not something that's new. It's something that if you look at other videos on how to do this, there's other videos that describe how to make this happen. But for me, the important part is the no math. When I sit down for a certification exam, I want to be able to subnet and not think about it because I'll get it wrong if I try to calculate it out. So it's my method for setting up and sitting down for a certification exam, writing out a very particular chart. And in that chart, using 2 fingers, go boom, boom, and you're subnetted in 7 seconds. So it'll be out. You'll see it on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll get a notification. Let's go to the calls, though. A lot of you just called right in. So let's talk to the 210 area code first. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
John Santos.
Hello, John. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, I just watched Study Group, and I have to admit I was really impressed and looking forward to January. But at the end of it, I kind of missed where you're talking about the number 1 thing, exam notes, the breakdown for the study.
The course notes, the Network Plus course notes.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, it was one of those things where I'm not sure where exactly what to study or where to start. So.
You mean the CompTIA exam objectives?
Yes.
That is probably and as I mentioned, that's the thing that I tell people the most. If you want the best possible tip for your exam, it's those exam objectives. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and it will take you to the CompTIA website. Okay. It just jumps you over there. Has everything in there. In fact, I'll pull up my exam objectives. You obviously can't see it on the phone, but I will show it in the stream so that you can see what these look like. They are extensive. And I would say probably no other organization. I have my old ones here for N10006, but I don't think there's anybody else out there. I'm talking Microsoft, Cisco, VMware. You talk anybody else, very few organizations give this level of detail about what you need to know for your exam. The one I'm looking at here is one of the little older ones, but it's the same content in the newer Network Plus exam objectives. It's just formatted differently on the screen. But look at the detail that's here with all of the connector types. I even have my comments and some of the highlighting that I did for my videos was in here. Everything. This is how I make my videos as I go through this. It's effectively a summary of what I create a video from, and it should be the summary of what you use whenever you're planning to take your exam as well. It's one of the best sources you can do, and I would bet if you have a good Network Plus book, most Network Plus books have a copy of this in the back, and they usually cross-reference to the chapter numbers. So if there's a particular topic you're trying to figure out, it'll point you back to the proper place in the book as well.
Okay. Thank Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good luck, John. There is, I don't know, probably at least one person a week will say, oh, I didn't do well on my exam. They asked me questions I wasn't expecting. And I'll say, well, what they ask? What were you not expecting? They say something very common. I say, well, that's in the exam objectives. And they go, what are the exam objectives? I don't know what you're talking about. So make sure you grab them. Let's go to 773 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? 773. Are you there? Are you there, caller? I'm going to return you to the queue. Well, not able to hear you there, caller, but we can always go back to the queue. Let's go to the next call down the line then, which is 864. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yeah, hi. My name's Darren.
Hey, thanks, Darren. Thanks for calling.
I just had a quick question. I've got the exam objectives, and I've been watching your videos pretty faithfully every day, trying to get all the information, in the brain and trying to make certain I'm ready for the exam.
Right.
But you never really are prepared unless you get input from other people who have taken it. And I just wanted to ask you, on your personal opinion, exactly how would you rate the difficulty of the Net Plus exam? Just sitting down. Because when I took my A Plus, both parts of it, to be completely honest with you, my leg would not stop jumping up and down, and both my hands went really cold from just nervousness. And then I passed it with no problem. And I just, didn't want to really run into that problem again. But then again, you probably will run into it.
You have exactly the same experience with your exam taking that I do. I get very nervous before walking into a certification exam, even when I know the content. I used to take certification exams that were based on the products that were for the company that I worked for as a systems engineer. Nobody knew the technical parts of this product in the field better than we did. We knew everything about how to configure and set these up, and we put them in the biggest networks in the world. We could make them dance, but you walk into an exam and you're just nervous, and that adrenaline I sit down. I always tell people I read the first question, and it's like I didn't even read it. It's like I couldn't even comprehend. Is that English? Is that a language that I'm reading? Let me read the question again. Still not getting it. Let me read the question slowly one more time. Okay, finally I understand what the question is. And it takes about 10 minutes for that to kind of wear off a bit. I would say from your question was more about difficulty of the exam. And I would say that the difficulty of the Network Plus is comparable to the difficulty of the A Plus exams, but of course the content is different. I'm not saying that they're the same content. I'm saying that the difficulty level, the way the questions are asked, the format of the exam, the difficulty level and what you're expected to know of the questions is very similar to the A Plus because it's obviously the same organization that's made these exams. So you're not going to get something asking you about detailed ones and zeros about a manufacturer's product. It's really going to stick very closely to the exam objectives. And I think I did on my videos, I try to balance out what I think the exam is going to expect you to know versus every possible thing you would possibly ever have to know for that particular topic. I could talk about DNS for a day, but the DNS section of my videos is 10 minutes long. But I think it's the 10 minutes that you need to know to answer the questions that are on the exam. Do you need to know more about DNS? Yes, you need to know a lot about DNS. But for the Network Plus exam, here's the piece you need to know. I think if you do happen to go further beyond what I could possibly give you in a video and you install a DNS server or you look at a live configuration of a DNS server or you just get more detail about that topic, it can only help you. But my videos are really focused on giving you just enough to be able to get through the pieces you need to know for the exam and are packaged in the right amount of data. But I don't find that they're trickier or harder or more complex than the A+. It's just a completely different set of topics. And when you take it, you'll find the cadence of these questions is very similar to the cadence that I had with A+.
Gotcha. I did notice that. I noticed that the A+ does definitely build sort of the foundation, and then the Net Plus just sort of rolls on top of the already content that was covered and kind of picking and choosing some individual bits and pieces, if you will. I've noticed some redundancies here and there, and it is wonderful to have that.
It is. There's not as much as there used to be. The latest A+ exam took out a lot of networking piece and tried to focus in A+ on what you need to know to configure a workstation. So it used to be there was information about IP classes and a little bit of subnetting that was in the A+ exam, and they got rid of a lot of that. So there's fewer overlaps than there used to be, which is kind of good. It's kind of bad, but it is the way they've set it up. Now there's much more of a focus on the Network Plus exam as you as the network administrator. So you do need to understand what a subnet is. And you do need to understand the basics of subnetting, what these CIDR block addresses are and how these routing protocols work and how you can look at a routing table. You're obviously not going to get any of that on the A+. That's what I mean, that it's not more difficult. It's just different types of info.
Totally understand.
Good. Well, good luck with that. Let us know how the test goes. And as long as you have your exam objectives, it sounds like you do, you're in pretty good shape.
Thank you, sir. I definitely will. I've actually got them pulled up in front of me.
Nice. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
There's that's my best thing that I tell people is get a copy of the course notes, and then I tell them to get a copy of the course or the exam objectives, and then get a copy of the exam objectives. It is your number one and number two thing you should be working towards for all of those. Let's go to 727 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
I am. My name is Vince. How you doing?
Hey, Vince. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm actually taking the exam tomorrow morning, and the one thing that I'm having trouble with is trying to remember the scenarios for the standards for wireless. Do you have any tips as far as I don't know, just the way that maybe you learned to remember them?
The wireless is kind of a pain. The way
802, 111.
Yeah, the way I learned them is you go back to when wireless was first implemented, and then you learn about that, and then they come out with the next version. You have to learn about that. So mine was kind of more of osmosis, and being old is kind of how I worked mine. Not everybody has that luxury of being an old guy and having to go through those pieces. And it's kind of a problem because there's so much that's similar in all of those different wireless formats, and there's only minor differences, it seems, between those. Plus, it's more complicated because 802.11a and 802.11b came out at effectively exactly the same time. They were two very different wireless functions.
Those are the ones that have the 5 gigahertz frequency,
right?
Correct?
Exactly. And so there was an entire group of equipment.
And that's been my problem, is trying to remember which ones are what, like between the frequencies, the actual speeds and things like that. Because I know that's with what you were just talking about before, the other guy calling and telling them to get involved with what the exam's actually going to consist of and things. And that's the one thing that it's told me to make sure that I harp on, is knowing the difference between them as far as speeds, the frequencies, and things like that. And that's been the most difficult thing about this entire process for me to remember.
That is one very good example on the exam where it's just rote memorization, where I have to remember the rote memorization of those wireless standards. And it's one that if you haven't worked with the differences and understood those, it's really looking at a flashcard or looking at a description or looking at a table and just memorizing the table and the differences between all of those.
Okay. That makes sense.
And it's one that now, and of course, now they've added to the exam all of the different standards, A, B, G, N, and AC. So
AC,
right.
Yeah.
So now they've added, at least that's the modern one we can actually apply. We can look at, if you have an AC router or an AC wireless access point, you can go into the AC access point. You can see all the frequencies that are listed there. There's at least some perspective that you can get. You can even see that, wait, there's one SSID for the AC, but then they make a different SSID for 2.4 gigahertz. And they do that because the 802.11ac only has 5 gigahertz. It doesn't have 2.4. So if you go down to 2.4, you're actually on an N network. So that just complicates things. But you just got to encapsulate all of those in your brain and memorize them. There's no easy way to do it other than just rote memorization.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it.
And good luck with the exam tomorrow. It's your last stab at it. Grab those exam objectives. Use them as your checklist. You'll know exactly where to cram.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate it.
Best of luck.
Have a great week.
Absolutely. Good luck.
You too.
There's a lot to know. That Network Plus exam, I think, is, if you got the exam objectives, you're in good shape. Yeah, the AC is crazy fast. I have AC here, I don't have it in the studio. I have it in my home. I don't have AC in the studio at the moment, and it is fast. It's very, very fast. Let's go to 773 area code. Hey there, caller. What's your name?
My name is Benson.
Oh, I can sort of hear you down there. Are you there? Can speak up just a little bit. What's your question?
My name is Ben. My question is, anytime I'm online, I couldn't get into.
Oh, it's difficult. You sound like you're a little bit far away from the microphone there. If you can get a little bit closer, we might be able to make out a little bit more.
Yeah, my name is Ben. Anytime I'm online, I couldn't get into the student login. I don't know why.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough to make out what you're saying there. It sounds like you're having some type of login issue. And if that is the case, if you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, there's a Contact Us link there. And I will absolutely answer any questions that you might have about logging in. I just don't have a way, unfortunately, to do that at the moment. But as soon as the live event is over, I can absolutely have a look at that and try to figure those pieces out. I think I caught that. I'm sorry that we didn't have a good connection there, but maybe we can figure out that in an email back and forth. Yeah, the background noise. We're actually able to hear the background better than we really hear you, unfortunately. Sounds like you have my phone. I have the same problem in trying to get all of that to work with those. It is the live chat that you have there. Some of you who are watching, we are looking at the live event chat on the Professor Messer website. There is a 24/7 chat that's always there, though. There's a general chat room that's always available on the website. So wherever you happen to be, you can always find that general chat room. And I'm usually in there with a bunch of other ne'er-do-wells. We try to answer questions people might have about the exam and what they happen to be, and be able to work through those. So Husam in the chat is even saying, we need a pop quiz collection book for Network Plus. I almost even agree with you. I'd love to do a pop quiz collection book for, I obviously have two for A+, one for the 901 and the 902 exam. I'd love to have one for Network Plus and love to have one for Security Plus. It takes about 3 months to write those books. So it's quite an undertaking to have that happen. So I'm not actively working on a Network Plus pop quiz book or a pop quiz collection at the moment. But I just think it's such a good idea. And you're right, it is so needed. There's nothing else out in the industry that's really helping in that way. I think it's an open opportunity for somebody to take advantage of. It's just I've got other projects going on right now, and right now there's just nothing else there that I can do about those pieces. Yes, the headquarters for Messer Studios is located here in Tallahassee, Florida. Right now it's a little bit rainy out at birdfeeder.live, which is the bird feeder that's right here behind the studio. It is a little bit wet. It's been raining all day, and I'm out of food, so we don't have any birds. If you were here on the pre-show, we had a number of birds that were here. Right now, what is it? 69 degrees, so not bad for Florida here in the middle of winter. Be able to do that. It gets a little colder tonight once this rain comes through, but that is where the world headquarters is of Messer Studios. Here, the studio itself is here. This is the main control center. This is where everything happens to be able to make it all run. I know the bird feeder looks so sad. It's wet. There's no food there. It needs to get all set up. On birdfeeder.live is where that bird feeder is. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week streaming of the bird feeder. And I've got a little bird watching list there so you can see what birds are there and try to figure out what we saw. We saw one I didn't recognize today. I need to find Mrs. Professor Messer is the birdie person, is the birdologist. That's not the right term. I apologize, bird people. But I'm not good with birds, and she is. So this was kind of a project that I set up with my daughter. And so we just have this streaming bird feeder that's always there, and we set up a 24/7 streaming connection. We're recording everything locally. We're streaming 24/7 out to YouTube. So it was a fun little project. I need to document what we did with that project. There's almost as much Network Plus content with that project as there was almost anything else I've done, because there is the networking part of it, the protocols that we used, how we set up the connection out to YouTube, how we're doing the streaming, how we got the power out there to the bird feeder, to the camera, what cameras we chose, how we chose the cameras. It's pretty interesting setup for those, being able to work through those. The chat room, yes, I am working on lots of projects. Would I be willing to make an MCSA Windows Server course? That's actually a pretty popular request. I don't have any current plans to do any additional Microsoft courses for a number of reasons, but I guess the primary one is that the world of Microsoft is very fragmented. There are people that need videos for Windows Workstation, Windows 8, Windows 10. There's people that need videos for Windows Server. And that's a good example, the one you requested. There's videos for people that need videos for Microsoft SQL Server, a completely different group of people. And very often, none of those people need to see any of those other videos. The Microsoft SQL Server people don't necessarily need to know much about Windows Server, and they certainly don't need to necessarily know much from a certification perspective about Windows 10. So the problem is that there are so many different certifications for Microsoft that I would spend 3 to 4, 5 months working on a course for that with a small little fragment of people. And that's my biggest challenge with Microsoft. If Microsoft had some certifications that were very broad, that covered a lot of folks, it would make more sense for me. But that's one of the advantages is I can focus my efforts and make very detailed videos that are very specific, that have a certain level of quality that I like. But the disadvantage is they have to have some type of a more global appeal. I think Windows Server is probably one of the more popular ones on the Microsoft line. So that would probably be the right one. But it's not something that I currently have in my list. It's in my top 10 list, but it's not near the top. That is one thing that I have is I have a big list of here's what I want to be able to do. And I'm always moving things around the list. There's always jockeying going on the list of how do I feel about this? What are people telling me about that? What do I hear about this? And I'm moving things up and down all the time. But you really have to be working on it all the time and figuring it out. Because when I do a project, it usually takes at least at a minimum 3 months to do any type of project that I'm working on to make it happen. So I just want to be sure to have that there. I don't have any plans for Server Plus either. Kind of the same problem is that it's so niche. It's so specific there that I just don't have any current plans for Server Plus either. I am currently working on a project, and it's something new. So I hope to have that done in the next couple of months as well, and being able to work through that. Yeah, the Microsoft stuff is an interesting one. I'm keeping my eye on Microsoft because you never know what they're going to do. You never know exactly what's next on the Microsoft front. They've certainly changed their perspective of the world in the last couple of years. Windows 10 was a dramatic change for Microsoft. It was more of a, I don't want to say totalitarian because it's not completely that way, but they have more control over your operating system than they've ever had before. And so that makes me a little nervous as well. What are they doing? What's next? How is that going to affect certifications, which is, of course, the important part for me. And so I'm just kind of watching what's going on, which is what I do all the time. It's never a dull moment with these operating systems. Linux has its own little things that are going on and their own groups of people. Microsoft, the same thing. I'd love to do more Apple-related videos, but there's a very small market for those. So there's a lot of things I want to do that I just won't do because there definitely is not a market available for those, even though it's something I just really, really enjoy. It's one of the challenges. I could spend time making something I really like that doesn't actually have any financial benefit. And my children, they like eating, they like clothing, they like a place to live. My daughter is going to college in her 3rd year now. So there's money that has to be paid for that. And I can't do that if I make something that people don't watch or don't purchase. So that's a little bit of a challenge. That's one of the balancing acts I have is I love to have this company where I can make something that helps people and there's a benefit, and there's a big free piece of it, but it's also something that's actually revenue generating. So it's a viable company, and I can earn money from it, and we can have food and clothing and shelter. So that's the balancing act I always go through. So that's a little bit more inside baseball, probably you were asking about. That's the concepts I have in my mind when I figure out what do I do next in these big lists of things. It's never just one thing, and being able to worry about what all those pieces are. This is, Windows 7. I have a lot of stuff that's still on Windows 7. The system that I use for video switching, in fact, you see a piece of it here. This is the control panel, the lighted control panel for the TriCaster video switching system. The audio is going through, the video is going through, everything going to you is going through that system. It's recording for me. It's doing the streaming from here. Everything that happens with that, the controls, you can kind of see up at the top, there's a big television just above. It's being cut off by the screen up there. But that's my TriCaster control. You can see a copy of that. It's kind of behind my head. It's actually duplicated here and here. I have 2 screens for that because I just don't have enough screens. So that's why I have 2 of them, because I like looking up rather than looking to the side, rather than doing this the whole time. So how you doing? Looking at stuff. That's not attractive. But looking, you notice I glance up a lot. I'm looking at what's on the slide and what you're seeing. I have the same view of it right in front of me. I don't want to look down too much at what's in front of me, because you'll see me looking down all the time. That doesn't look nice either. So that's why that's up there. There's a method to this madness. Of course there is. Of course there is. That's a little bit more. The challenge I have, Windows 10's been a constant challenge for me. Windows 10 is what we are using to do our bird feeder streaming. So I'm trying to keep my hands in everything. I try to do Windows 7 for the video switching. My audio system that I use here is actually a pretty nice audio mixer. It's running Linux. I don't really see the Linux that's there. It's more of an embedded Linux, but that's my Linux box. Obviously, the Professor Messer website is all Linux, and then I've got Windows 10 in the other room in the data center, which is my single rack, and the data center is got Windows 10 running on it for those. So I try to keep all of them going. Windows 10's been the biggest disappointment to me. It's hard to manage. It's difficult to keep it from rebooting whenever I don't want it to. Microsoft tends to force things down and force the reboot. And then I think I figured out all the different pieces that had to be turned on and turned off and tweaked to make that happen now. So I think I have gotten it so it doesn't reboot on its own anymore, but we'll see, because Microsoft might flip a switch one day and change that as well. It's a little bit of a challenge in making that happen. But it works, and it's been solid. That's the problem, is that the darn thing works. I loaded Linux and did the Linux streaming from it, and it was a disaster. Linux was just not ready for prime time. The software that you needed to make this work didn't work very well. Microsoft Windows had a package that works extremely well. So it was more of, where can I find software that's going to work for this very niche thing? And in this particular case, Linux failed completely and Windows was a huge success. On my website, I'm always going to run Linux. Makes sense to run that on my website. I would never run Windows on my website. So it just depends. No, you don't. Setting up active hours and it won't update music. Doesn't work that way. Nope. Tried it. Does not work that way. If they want to update the system, they will update the system regardless of when your active hours and when you tell it to update or not. That is the problem, is that there's like 4 different things you have to configure. All of them that say this is what does it, none of them did it. Really a pain. What is the most common command line tool used in network troubleshooting? What is the most common command line tool used in network troubleshooting? What would it be? What would it be? It'd have to be ping, of course. That's what we all do whenever we're troubleshooting. Hey, I can't talk to the thing. Well, let's see if it's there. Let's ping it. Of course, that's going to be it. And next on the list, probably SSH, maybe an IP config. I guess that's a good one. Yeah. Right. You do the IP config first, or the if config, and then you have a look at what you need to ping. What's my default gateway? Let's see if we can ping it there. Microsoft doesn't hate me. Microsoft hates everyone. Let's get that straight. they're fine with that. I think that's what this has come to, is that Microsoft really has quite a bit of disdain towards the users, the home users of their products, and the business users as well. And they're fine with that. And I think that's where they just are as a company. They're fine with that. They're going to force these things down your throat, and you're just going to eat it and take it, and that's the way it works. And if you don't like it, you can use something else. Oh, wait, you can't. It's a weird thing to do. It's a weird thing as a company to do, but that's what they've done. But that's okay. I get it. I understand. Yep, that's the thing. Windows 10 was a free upgrade. Of course it was. And then we use their free internet access, and then they blow up our heads, and then they get rid of global warming. That's what's happening here. I knew it. I knew it the whole time that's what was going on. I just watched that again the other night. I can't get enough of that movie. There's a lot to go through though, and the Microsoft, it's just that it works. I think I'm running on my Windows machine, running Windows 10. The streaming software I'm using for that, what's that gaming streaming software that I use? It's been the best streaming software for this. Somebody will know. What is streaming software most gamers use? That's the one I'm using. It's not I'm not using it for gaming, obviously, but it's one that most gamers are using it to stream what's on their desktop. And it's great because it has an XML hook in it. It's not OBS, it's the other one. So OBS is the one that wouldn't work in Linux, and it didn't work very well in Windows either. It's one you have to pay for. So OBS you don't have to pay for. It's the other one. The nice thing about it, though, is it has an XML hook. So whenever, I'll show you. So on the bird feeder is a very good example of this. So this is, it's not the one Twitch is the service, but it's not going to Twitch, it's going to YouTube. But people do use this. Is it XSplit? It is XSplit, isn't it? Maybe it's XSplit. I knew you people would know. Let me look it up. Yeah, it's XSplit. That's what I'm using. I'm using the broadcaster version. And boy, it works so well. It has an XML piece, a hook in it for XML. So let's go back to bird feeder. So this is a good example of this. The bird feeder itself is coming from a security camera. It's a HD, a full HD 1080p security camera that's set up in the backyard that I'm powering with power over Ethernet. So it's a single Ethernet cable coming out of the studio going right to the camera. But what's cool about XSplit is it has these hooks for XML. And so what I've done is told it, well, put on the screen the date and the time. So at the top you can see my local time and the local date of where this is. So if you watch a replay, you'll know where that came from. But then it has this weather here. You can see the weather that pops up. Tallahassee, Florida. It's overcast. It's 69 degrees Fahrenheit and 20.6 degrees Celsius. And I get that directly from, in the United States, we have the National Weather Service. And National Weather Service, they publish this broadcast, the weather information in an XML file. So I have XSplit every hour go out to that XML file, pull it in, parse it, because XML is so easy to parse, find these particular values, and put that value on the screen. And it does it. It's just perfect. So anytime you hit birdfeeder.live, you will see all of that. Oh, look, we have a visitor. So anytime, oh, what is that? Oh, great. I have hornets. So anytime you see the weather forecast up there, it's coming directly from the weather service here in the United States, and it's one that just changes and updates by itself automatically. So as the night comes and things get dark, it works perfect, and be able to work through that. It's a nice option too, because it's able to, I can add other things to this mix. I can manipulate the way the screen looks. I can put these little labels on here for birdfeeder.live and the copyright information. And those are just labels I stuck on the screen that happen to be at the same place as the bird feeder. You'll notice when the bird feeder moves, the text doesn't move. Those aren't real labels that are sitting out there. That's just something that happens to be on the screen that I've overlaid on the top of this. So XSplit is, they have an XSplit version absolutely used for gaming. This is the XSplit Broadcaster, which is very similar in this, but it is something that's very commonly used for video streaming. Plus, it's grabbing the video signal directly from the camera. It's not grabbing it from a video security system. So you don't have to have a separate security system with drives that are storing information. That's completely optional. I'm pulling it directly from the camera using the streaming protocols that are supported in XSplit, which is nice too. Some of the other, like OBS, its method of pulling in those, what protocol am I using there? I'll have to look and see which one it is. It's not MMS, it's something else. But the protocol I'm using to do the video and the audio, you can hear the audio here, that protocol is one that OBS just had such a problem with. I would have loved to use it because it was free, but it didn't work so well. So that's just the way it goes. It doesn't work, you go to the next thing. I tried it both. It had the same problem both in Linux and Windows with OBS. So it doesn't seem like it was Linux wasn't the problem, OBS was the problem. But in Linux, there's not a lot of options for doing something like this. So that's just how it works out. I believe that is a Carolina wren, isn't it? What is that? Not a brown thrasher. I'm not the birdie person. Somebody described earlier in the chat was an ornithologist. I don't know. I am not an animal person. I like dogs. That's kind of it. It's kind of where my world is. I can feed them. I can put the food in, and that's done. Now, yeah, it's not thresher. Those are much bigger. I know that. Mrs. Professor Messer, she is the animal person. She has a horse. Okay, I don't deal with the horse. That's her thing. We got a bunch of dogs. Ornithologist. An ornithologist is the bird person. Thank you, Ken Snyder. Why feeding birds? Why have that bird feeder in the back? Why not? Well, we have bird feeders all over in the back of the studio here, just everything that's there. And I needed a project. My daughter she just finished her AA degree. She wasn't ready to go to the third year of her college classes. And she wanted to work here. So we came up with a project. How could we put all these things together? We built the server. We bought our own motherboard. We bought all the components. We put them together ourselves. We stuck them in the rack ourselves. We found all the right software. We went through and figured out which camera we should get based on all of these different options. It was a great project, and have that there. So question in the chat room, could I explain my interpretation between a help desk position and a service desk position? Well, they're the same thing. In all the places where I have worked, the help desk and the service desk, those are the same thing. There's no difference there. I guess it's just a difference. Some people have a information services. Some people have a IT services. Well, some people have computer services. Same thing. Now, I'm sure that some organizations might be so big that there might be a help desk and there might be a separate service desk. Maybe those are two different things in those environments. I have worked with a number of organizations that were worldwide companies. They were very big and very large and were distributed. Technical people were distributed all over the world. And they had different people that handled different things. So for example, we had a piece of software that we need to load onto a machine that was a Windows operating system. And that provided a security function for a firewall, but it also needed to talk to the Active Directory server to be able to get the information to provide it to the firewall. So this took probably 4 or 5 different groups within that organization. I needed the group that handled the virtual machine that it was going to be on. I needed the group that handled the security of the loading of the software, so the security group. I needed another security team that handled access to the Active Directory infrastructure. And then I needed the Windows people to provide me with the service account that would allow me access to the Active Directory infrastructure. So there were at least 4 different groups I was going through just to be able to install one piece of software. So it's not unusual. That's pretty common. run into that environment and be able to work through those. Hold on a second. Let me move things around here. There are very common ways that people will do that and work through those pieces. Can I explain CWDM versus DWDM? How much we need to dive into them for the exam? I have a video on this, ironically, and you don't have to go very deep with any of those and being able to work through the differences. There are, in fact, my course notes, I think I summarized it. And I think both, they fit into the section 1.4. There's a video that talks about those fiber connections for Sonnet, DWDM, and CWDM out there in the index. And there's not much. I think there's probably one slide each on those. There's not a lot of content you have to know. You don't have to dive really deep into those. Those are very complex infrastructures with extensive, people go to weeks of training to understand how to properly implement those. I give you a slide. So that should give you an example of the differences between what you need to know for the Network Plus exam and what you need to know to be able to actually work with that. It's involved. Being able to work through all those is pretty important. The Network Plus exam, there's no updates designed for it for at least a year or so. So I'm very lucky in that respect that there's not a new version coming along. So whatever you've got in there now, that's what's going to work for you. That's what's going to be there. Well, I think it's time. We've come to the end of, I think, almost a second hour, and my voice says that's time, that we're finished with the study group. So stop talking already. And I think it's right. There is plenty more, though, on the Network Plus side we'll be working on. Obviously, the next study group is coming up for Network Plus on January the 11th. It's out there. If you go to professormester.com/calendar, it's already there and available for you to see what is there, to be able to have that there and set up. There is also next week at this time, if you just like to attend the study groups, I've got a Security Plus study group that you're welcome to attend as well. I've got to work on those questions and get that going. But I want to thank all of you for attending. It has been a good year. As I said in the end of the first hour, it's been a fantastic year at Besser Studios. This has been a blast, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without your support. If I don't see you until the next Network Plus study group, I hope you have a great rest of the year. The holiday season is here. It's a great time to hang out with family, and I hope you have a wonderful time, a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2017. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next time on the study group.